because of family. One cruel comment from her ex was all it took for Evelyn Carter to sign a marriage certificate with her own secretary. The business world laughed. A millionaire marrying the help. A single father with nothing to offer but loyalty and a 6-year-old daughter. They called it desperate. They called it pathetic. But 6 months later, when Daniel Brooks stood beside her at the most powerful investment gala in the city, his hand steady on her back, no one was laughing anymore. Something had shifted. The question wasn't what changed. The question was who. The breakup happened on a Tuesday. Evelyn Carter signed off on a $12 million acquisition that morning and ended a 3-year relationship that afternoon. Marcus Hale had called it inevitable. She called it efficient. Neither of them cried. That should have told her everything she needed to know. 3 weeks later, she was still working 16-hour days. Her investment firm occupied the top 4 floors of a glass tower in downtown Manhattan, and from her corner office, she could see the entire city spread out like a chessboard. She had built her empire on precision and control. Emotions were variables she had learned to eliminate early in her career. Men like Marcus appreciated that until they chose not to. Daniel Brooks arrived at 7:45 every morning with her coffee and a breakdown of the day's schedule. He had worked for her for 2 years. He was reliable in a way that most people were not. He never asked personal questions. He never looked at her like she needed saving. When she stayed late, he stayed later. When she snapped at him for errors that were not his fault, he corrected them without complaint. She knew almost nothing about his life outside the office, except that he had been married once, and it had not worked out. He wore the same watch every day, a simple silver piece, with a scratched face that looked like it had survived something. He never talked about it. She never asked. What she did not know was that Daniel picked up his daughter from school every day at 3:15. Her name was Lily. She was 6 years old with dark curls and a gap between her front teeth. She asked too many questions and believed her father could fix anything. Daniel had full custody. The divorce had been ugly, but he had walked away with the only thing that mattered. The gala was scheduled for Friday night. It was the kind of event Evelyn normally skipped, but her publicist had insisted. The optics mattered. Venture capital investors did not trust women who looked too isolated. She needed to be seen. She wore black. She always wore black. It made decisions easier. Marcus would be there. She knew that because his firm had bought a table near the stage. He always bought a table near the stage. He liked being close to the applause. Daniel had offered to attend as her assistant. She had declined. There were limits to how much she wanted to blur the lines between professional and personal, even if those lines had already started to feel arbitrary. She told him to go home early. He nodded and left without argument, the way he always did. The ballroom was too bright and too loud. Champagne flowed in rivers of gold liquid that no one really wanted, but everyone drank anyway. Evelyn moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries that meant nothing. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. Marcus found her near the bar. He looked the same as he always did. Expensive suit, perfect hair, smile that did not reach his eyes. He had brought a date, a blonde woman in her 20s who laughed at everything he said. Evelyn recognized the performance. She had been that woman once. Marcus greeted her with a familiarity that felt like an insult. He introduced his date as if Evelyn cared. Then he leaned in close, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The words came out smooth and casual, like he was commenting on the weather. "You know what your problem is, Evelyn. You have money. You have power. But no man is ever going to stay with you for love. You are too cold for that." The blonde date laughed at something someone else said. The room kept moving. The champagne kept flowing. Evelyn stood very still. She had trained herself not to react to men like Marcus, but the words landed anyway. They always did. He walked away before she could respond. Not that she would have. She had learned a long time ago that defending yourself only confirmed what people already believed. She finished her drink. She smiled at 3 investors who wanted her money. She left before the speeches started. The car ride back to her apartment was silent. The driver asked no questions. She stared out the window at the city lights blurring past and thought about Marcus's words. The problem was not that they were cruel. The problem was that they felt true. She had spent her entire adult life building something that could not be taken away. Money, reputation, control. She had sacrificed relationships for board meetings. She had chosen career over connection every single time. And now she was 38 years old, alone in the back of a town car, wondering if she had traded the wrong things. When she got home, she poured herself a glass of wine she did not drink. She sat in her living room with the lights off and the city glowing outside her window. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably laughing about what he had said. Somewhere out there, people were proving him right. She thought about Daniel. She thought about the way he never looked at her like she was broken. She thought about the fact that he had survived his own divorce and still showed up every day with her coffee exactly the way she liked it. She thought about stability, about control, about contracts that were clear and honest and did not pretend to be anything other than what they were. The idea arrived fully formed, the way her best investment strategies always did. It was impulsive. It was calculated. It was possibly the most reckless thing she had ever considered, but the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. By Monday morning, she had a plan. Daniel arrived at 7:45 with her coffee and the daily briefing. He set both on her desk and waited for instructions. She looked at him differently than she had before. He was younger than her by 5 years. He had the kind of face that people trusted. Calm, steady, unremarkable in the way that made him easy to overlook. That was useful. She told him to close the door. He did. She told him to sit. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before lowering himself into the chair across from her desk. He looked like a man bracing for bad news. She almost felt sorry for what she was about to say. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." Daniel folded his hands in his lap. He was good at listening. It was one of the reasons she had hired him. "I want you to marry me." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel's expression remained steady. He sat there, waiting for the rest of it. She had not expected that level of composure. It would not be real. It would be a contract, a legal agreement. You would receive a significant financial compensation, full benefits, a trust fund for your daughter's education. She watched his eyes flicker at the mention of his daughter. That was the part she had counted on. She knew he was struggling. She had seen the way his shirts had started to fray at the cuffs. She had noticed the late payments on his credit report when she ran his background check before hiring him. A single father, working as an executive secretary, did not have a lot of financial breathing room. In exchange, you would attend events with me. You would maintain the appearance of a stable marriage. No personal obligations, no emotional entanglements, just a professional arrangement. Why? His voice was quiet. Evelyn could have lied. She could have told him it was about taxes or business strategy or media perception. But Daniel had never treated her like she needed to be anything other than honest, and she owed him the same courtesy. "Because someone told me I am incapable of being loved, and I want to prove them wrong, or at least make them think I did." Daniel looked at her for a long time. She could see him weighing the risks. She could see him calculating what this would mean for his life, for Lily's life. She had chosen him because he was practical, because he understood that sometimes survival meant making hard choices that made no sense to anyone else. How long? 6 months minimum. We can extend to a year if needed. After that, we dissolve the marriage quietly. You walk away with enough money to give your daughter a real future. I walk away with proof that I am not as unlovable as people think. It was a terrible reason to get married. She knew that. But it was also honest, and honesty was the only currency she had left. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at his hands. He looked everywhere except at her. She waited. She was good at waiting. I will need to think about it. Evelyn nodded. She had expected that. She told him to take the day. She told him she would understand if he said no. She meant it. Daniel stood to leave. He made it to the door before he stopped. He turned back to look at her, and for the first time since she had known him, she could not read his expression. If I say yes, we do this right. No lies to Lily. She deserves to know the truth, and if this affects her negatively in any way, the deal is off. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. It was not relief. It was not hope. It was something closer to respect. Agreed. Daniel left. The door closed behind him. Evelyn sat alone in her office with her untouched coffee and the possibility of a future she had not planned for. She was uncertain if he would say yes. She was uncertain if this was the smartest move she had ever made or the most self-destructive. But for the first time in 3 weeks, she felt like she was doing something instead of surviving something. Her phone buzzed. A text from her publicist. Marcus had been quoted in a business journal calling her brilliant but brittle. The article would run tomorrow. She deleted the message. She already knew what it would say. By the end of the day, Daniel had not given her an answer. She went home to her empty apartment and wondered what it would feel like to share a space with another person again. She wondered what Lily looked like. She wondered if this was what desperation felt like, or if it was something else entirely. The answer came the next morning. Daniel arrived at 7:45 with her coffee and a single sentence. I will do it. Evelyn looked at him across her desk. He looked tired. He looked uncertain. He looked like a man who had just agreed to something he did not fully understand. She felt the same way. Okay, then let's get married. They signed the papers on a Thursday morning at the courthouse. No family. No friends. Just 2 witnesses pulled from the hallway and a judge who looked bored. Evelyn wore a gray suit. Daniel wore the same one he wore to work every day. The ceremony lasted 7 minutes. When the judge told Daniel he could kiss the bride, he shook her hand instead. It felt appropriate. The first person Evelyn met as Daniel's wife was Lily. Daniel had insisted on introducing them before the marriage became public. They met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Daniel's apartment. Lily had her father's eyes and a backpack covered in stickers of cartoon animals. She looked at Evelyn with the kind of direct curiosity that only children could manage. Daniel had explained the arrangement to his daughter the night before. He told her the truth the way he had promised he would. That Evelyn needed help, that they were going to pretend to be married for a while, that it was a job, like any other job, but it meant they would be spending more time together. Lily had asked if Evelyn was nice. Daniel had said yes. Evelyn was not sure if that was true, but she appreciated the lie. Do you like pancakes? Her voice was small but confident. She was testing Evelyn. Children always tested adults in their own way. I do. It wasn't a lie. She had not eaten pancakes in years, but she remembered liking them. Daddy makes the best pancakes, but he always burns the edges. Daniel looked embarrassed. Evelyn almost smiled. It was strange seeing him in this context. At work, he was unshakable. Here, with his daughter, he was softer, more human. She filed that information away without knowing why it mattered. They stayed for coffee and pastries. Evelyn had a meeting at 11. But before they left, Lily looked at her seriously and said something that would stay with Evelyn longer than it should have. Are you going to be sad when this is over? Evelyn had no answer ready, so she told the truth. I don't know yet. The news broke 2 days later. Someone at the courthouse had talked. Or maybe someone from Daniel's building had seen them leaving together. It did not matter how it started. By Monday morning, every business blog and society column had the same headline: Millionaire investor Evelyn Carter marries her secretary. The articles wrote themselves. The office was worse than she expected. Her assistant avoided eye contact. The junior partners whispered in the break room. Even the cleaning staff looked at her differently. She had weathered scandals before: hostile takeovers, failed mergers, public disputes with board members. But this felt different. This felt personal. Daniel arrived at 7:45 with her coffee. He set it down without comment. His expression was unreadable. She wondered if he regretted saying yes. She wondered if he had read the articles calling him a social climber, a gold digger, a man with nothing to offer except proximity to wealth. "I'm sorry." She apologized rarely. The words felt strange in her mouth. Daniel looked at her. He appeared tired rather than angry. "You told me this would happen. I knew what I was signing up for." But knowing and experiencing were different things. Evelyn understood that now. Marcus called her that afternoon. She let it go to voicemail. He called again an hour later. She blocked the number. By evening, he had reached out to a journalist instead. The quote appeared online the next morning. Marcus Hale, former partner of Evelyn Carter, says the marriage is the worst business deal she has ever made. He expressed concern for her judgment and questioned her ability to lead her firm effectively. Evelyn read the article twice. Then she deleted it. Then she poured herself a drink she left unfinished. The apartment felt too big. The silence felt too loud. She thought about calling Daniel. She had no idea what she would say if she did. The investment summit was scheduled for the following week. It was the largest event of the year. 1,500 investors, 30 keynote speakers, billions of dollars in potential partnerships. Evelyn was slated to moderate a panel on emerging markets. She had prepared for months. Now she was walking into a room full of people who thought she had lost her mind. Daniel offered to stay home. She told him to come. She was not hiding. She was not ashamed. If people wanted to judge her, they could do it to her face. They arrived together. Daniel wore a suit she had not seen before. It fit him better than his usual ones. She wondered if he had bought it for this. She chose not to ask. They walked through the lobby side by side, and she could feel every pair of eyes tracking their movement. Conversations stopped. Phones came out. By the time they reached the conference hall, she knew photos were already circulating online. The panel was supposed to start at 10. At 9:45, one of the sponsors pulled out. No explanation, just a curt email saying they were reallocating their budget. Evelyn knew what that meant. They wanted no association with her anymore. The organizers were scrambling. The moderator was panicking. The whole event was on the verge of falling apart. Daniel asked no permission. He stepped in. He called the sponsor directly. Evelyn had no idea how he got the number. She watched him move to a quiet corner of the hall, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and controlled. She could not hear what he was saying, but she could see the way he held himself. Calm. Steady. Unwavering. 10 minutes later, he returned. The sponsor was back in. The panel would proceed as planned. "What did you say to them?" Daniel straightened his tie. He looked at her with something that might have been amusement. "I told them that walking away from Evelyn Carter was the kind of mistake their competitors would thank them for, and that if they wanted to make that mistake, I would personally ensure every investor in this room knew about it." Evelyn stared at him. She had hired Daniel because he was competent. She had married him because he was stable. She had not expected him to be dangerous. The panel went well. Better than well. Evelyn spoke about market trends and risk assessment and the future of venture capital. She fielded questions with precision. She made 3 new connections that would turn into deals worth millions. And the entire time, Daniel was there. Not behind her, not beside her, just present in a way that made it clear he was not decoration. He was part of this. After the panel, a journalist approached them. Young, aggressive, hungry for a story. She asked Evelyn how it felt to be married to an employee. She asked if this was a publicity stunt. She asked if Evelyn was worried about how this looked. Daniel answered before Evelyn could. My wife does not need to worry about how anything looks. She built a $150 million firm from nothing. She has outlasted every critic and outperformed every competitor. If you want a story, write about that. The journalist blinked. She had clearly expected him to be quiet, to defer, to prove every assumption people had made about him. Instead, he had shut her down without raising his voice. Evelyn felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. It was not gratitude. It was something closer to partnership. They left the summit early. In the car, Evelyn looked at Daniel and realized she had never really seen him until today. She had worked with him for 2 years. She had married him, but she had never really seen him until today. Thank you. Daniel glanced at her. He looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. It is my job. No, it is not. He gave no response, but she could see the shift in his expression, the acknowledgement that something between them had changed. The news cycle moved fast. By the next day, the summit photos were everywhere. Daniel standing beside Evelyn. Daniel speaking to investors. Daniel looking like he belonged. The narrative started to shift. Maybe this was not a desperate woman clinging to an employee. Maybe this was something else. But Marcus was not done. The rumors started small. Whispers in boardrooms, anonymous comments on business forums, questions about Daniel's background, suggestions that he was using Evelyn for access, implications that the marriage was a calculated move on his part, that he had targeted her, that she was too blind to see it. Evelyn knew it was Marcus. She recognized his fingerprints on the strategy. He had always been good at planting doubt, at making people question their own judgment. She told herself it was irrelevant. She told herself the contract was clear. Daniel was getting paid. She was getting appearances. That was the deal. Nothing more. But the doubt crept in anyway. She started noticing things. The way Daniel networked at events. The way he collected business cards. The way investors who had ignored him before were suddenly taking his calls. She told herself it was good. It was part of the arrangement. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that Marcus might be right. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday night. Evelyn had stayed late at the office reviewing contracts. Daniel had stayed with her. He always stayed with her. She had never questioned it before. Now she did. Why are you still here? Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Daniel looked up from his laptop. He had been answering emails. His own emails, not hers. I'm working. On what? The question hung in the air. She knew what she was really asking. She knew it was unfair, but she could not stop herself. Daniel closed his laptop. He looked at her with something that might have been disappointment. You think I am using you? It was not a question. Evelyn gave no answer. She needed to give none. Daniel stood. He gathered his things slowly, methodically, like he was making a decision in real time. I said yes to this arrangement because I needed the money. I needed to give Lily a future that did not involve me working 3 jobs. That was true then. It is still true now. His voice was even, too even. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a contract for me. And I think it stopped being just a contract for you, too. That is the problem. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, but she could not find the words. I'm stepping down. From the job. From the marriage. You will get your 6 months. I will fulfill the contract. But I will not be your secretary anymore. And I will not pretend this is something it is not. He left before she could respond. The office felt enormous without him in it. The silence felt like an accusation. Evelyn sat in her chair and stared at the city below. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. Proof that she could be married. Proof that Marcus was wrong. But Daniel had been right. This had stopped being just a contract, and she had ruined it by treating it like one. Her phone buzzed. A message from her publicist. Marcus had given another interview. This time he called the marriage a performance, a desperate attempt to seem normal. The article would run in the morning. Evelyn deleted the message. She turned off her phone. She sat in the dark and realized she had lost the only person who had ever made her feel like she was not carrying everything alone. Daniel came back to clear his desk on Friday. His replacement arrived on Monday. She was efficient, but she was not Daniel. She had no idea how Evelyn took her coffee. She could not anticipate problems before they happened. She could not make the office feel less empty. Evelyn closed a $20 million deal that week. She was featured in 2 financial magazines. Her firm's stock rose by 8%. By every measurable standard, she was more successful than she had ever been. But success had never felt this hollow before. She went through the motions, meetings, contracts, conference calls that blurred together. At night, she returned to her apartment and realized she had started listening for sounds that were not there. A child's laughter, the low murmur of Daniel's voice, the evidence of other people existing in her space. She had never wanted that before. Now the silence felt like punishment. Marcus's interview ran in the business section of a major newspaper. He looked smug in the photo. The headline called Evelyn's marriage a cautionary tale about mixing business with desperation. She read the entire article, every word, every implication. And somewhere around the 3rd paragraph, something inside her shifted. She was not angry at Marcus. She had never really been angry at Marcus. Anger required caring, and she had stopped caring about him the moment he walked away. What she felt was something deeper, something older. It was the fear he had named at the gala, the fear that she was fundamentally unlovable unless she offered something in return. Money, status, control. That love was always transactional, and she had nothing to offer except the things she had built. Daniel had asked for none of it. He had shown up. He had stood beside her. He had defended her when she had not requested it. And the moment she questioned his motives, he had walked away. Not because he was guilty, because he had wanted more than a contract, and she had reminded him that was not what this was. She had spent her entire life protecting herself from vulnerability. She had built walls so high that no one could hurt her, but walls kept everything out, including the things worth keeping. The realization arrived like exhaustion, like finally admitting something she had known all along. She found Daniel at a park 3 blocks from his apartment. It was Saturday afternoon. He was pushing Lily on a swing. The little girl was laughing, her hair flying behind her as she kicked her legs higher. Daniel looked tired, but present. He always looked present with his daughter. Evelyn stood at the edge of the playground and watched them for a moment. She felt like an intruder, like someone looking through a window at a life she had no place in. But she had come this far. She could not turn back now. Lily saw her first. She shouted something to Daniel and jumped off the swing mid-arc. She landed hard but stayed on her feet. Daniel turned. His expression remained neutral when he saw Evelyn. He looked like someone waiting to hear bad news. Lily ran over before either adult could speak. She looked up at Evelyn with that same direct curiosity from the coffee shop. "Did you come to see Daddy?" "I did." "Are you still sad?" The question was so simple it nearly broke something in Evelyn's chest. She crouched down to Lily's level. She had no idea how to talk to children. She only knew how to be honest. "Yes, but I am trying to fix that." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She ran back to the swings. Daniel approached slowly. He kept his hands in his pockets. He looked like a man bracing for impact. I came to apologize. You were right. About all of it. This stopped being a contract a long time ago, and I ruined it because I was too afraid to admit that. She had rehearsed this. She had practiced what she would say. But now that she was here, the words felt inadequate. Daniel said nothing. He just looked at her with those steady eyes that had always seen more than she wanted them to. I spent my whole life believing that I had to earn love, that it was something I could negotiate or control, that if I was successful enough, smart enough, strong enough, someone would stay. But that is not love. That is just another transaction. Her voice was quieter now, and I am tired of transacting. The wind picked up. Somewhere behind them, Lily was singing to herself. Daniel looked at his daughter, then back at Evelyn. What are you asking for? I do not know. I do not know how to do this without a contract, without rules. But I want to try, if you will let me. Daniel was quiet for a long time. She could see him weighing her words, testing them for sincerity. She had given him every reason not to trust her. I need to know you are not doing this to prove Marcus wrong. I need to know this is not about winning. It is not. Marcus does not matter. He never did. This is about me being honest for the first time in my life about what I actually want. And what do you want? Evelyn looked at him. At this man who had walked into her life as an employee and somehow become the only person who made her feel like she wasn't carrying everything alone. She had spent weeks telling herself this was an arrangement, a strategy, a way to solve a problem. But that had always been a lie. I want you, not as an employee, not as a contract, just as you. Daniel's expression finally changed, not a smile, but something softer, something that looked like relief. Okay, then let's try. The press conference happened 3 days later. Evelyn called it herself. She asked no one's permission. She consulted no board members. She just scheduled a room at a downtown hotel and invited every journalist who had written about her marriage. Daniel stood beside her, not behind her, beside her. She had asked him to come. He had said yes. That was enough. The room was packed. Cameras everywhere. Reporters with notebooks and recording devices. She could see the hunger in their eyes. They wanted a scandal. They wanted a breakdown. They wanted proof that the millionaire had made a mistake. Evelyn stepped up to the microphone. She looked directly at the cameras. She had given hundreds of speeches. She had faced down hostile investors and skeptical board members. But this felt different. This felt like stepping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch her. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I married Daniel Brooks because I wanted to prove that I was capable of being loved. That was the truth then. But it is not the truth now. She could hear the rustle of movement, pens on paper, the click of cameras. She kept going. I married him because I was afraid. Afraid that success meant loneliness, that power meant isolation, that the only way to be respected was to sacrifice connection. And I let that fear turn something real into something transactional. Daniel was watching her. She could feel it. If she looked at him, she would lose her nerve. There have been questions about Daniel's motives, suggestions that he is using me, that this marriage is a calculation on his part. I want to be very clear about something. Daniel Brooks is the most principled person I have ever met. She took a breath. He pursued nothing. I did. He manipulated nothing. I manipulated the situation because I was too proud to admit I needed help. And when I questioned his integrity, he walked away. Because unlike me, he knows his worth is not tied to what he can offer someone else. The room was silent now. She could see Marcus in the back. He looked uncomfortable. Good. So if you want to write about this marriage, write about a woman who finally learned that vulnerability is not weakness, that asking for help is not failure, that sometimes the person you need is the one you have been overlooking because you were too busy protecting yourself to see them. She stepped back from the microphone. She took no questions. She just walked out with Daniel beside her. The cameras followed them to the door. Let them take pictures. Let them write whatever they wanted. She had said what needed to be said. Outside, the air was cold. Daniel looked at her with something that might have been pride. That was reckless. I know. Your board is going to be furious. I know. But it was honest. I know. Daniel reached for her hand. It was the first time he had touched her without an audience, without a purpose, just because he wanted to. She held on. So what happens now? Evelyn looked at him, at this man who had agreed to a contract and somehow turned it into something real without either of them noticing. She had no plan. She had no strategy. For the first time in her life, she was operating without a map. I guess we figure it out together. 6 months later, Evelyn stood in the ballroom of the same hotel where Marcus had humiliated her, the annual investor gala. Daniel was beside her, not as her secretary, not as her husband in name only, just as her partner. Lily was at home with a babysitter. They had considered bringing her, but 6-year-olds and formal events mixed poorly. Evelyn had promised to bring her dessert. She had started making promises to Lily. Small ones. Easy ones. The kind that taught both of them that commitment was not complicated. The room was full of the same people who had whispered about her months ago. But the whispers had changed. Now they talked about how Daniel had negotiated a $15 million partnership with a firm in Singapore, how he had restructured Evelyn's portfolio to increase returns by 12%, how he had proven that he was not decoration. He was dangerous. Marcus was there. He avoided them. Evelyn no longer cared. She had stopped measuring her worth by his opinion a long time ago. An investor approached them, someone Evelyn had worked with for years. He shook Daniel's hand first, then hers. He told them they made a good team. He was right. On the way home, Daniel drove while Evelyn looked out the window at the city lights. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, angry, defensive, alone. She thought about the contract she had offered, the marriage she had built on fear, the way she had almost destroyed the best thing in her life because she was unable to accept something without conditions. Money could buy attention. It could open doors. It could solve problems. But it could not create love. That required something messier, something harder. It required showing up. It required being wrong. It required admitting that you needed someone else and trusting they would not use it against you. What are you thinking about? Evelyn looked at him. At the man who had stayed when he could have left, who had come back when she had given him every reason to walk away, who had turned a contract into a partnership and a partnership into something neither of them had expected. I'm thinking that I'm glad you said yes. Daniel smiled. It was a rare thing. She had learned to appreciate rare things. Me too. And for the first time in a very long time, Evelyn believed that she was enough, not because of what she had built, not because of what she could offer, just because she was. That was worth more than any deal she had ever closed.